Have you ever met someone who seems to hate people? Not in a loud or obvious way, but quietly, deeply, almost like the world itself has worn them down. They avoid conversations, keep their distance, and look at human connection as something exhausting rather than comforting. At first glance, they may seem cold, rude, or arrogant, but what if that hatred isn't really about people at all? What if it's a shield built slowly over years of disappointment, betrayal, and emotional overload? This story begins with a simple question. Why do some people pull away from others so strongly that they begin to resent human interaction itself? Not crowds, not noise, but people, friends, family, strangers, the kind of people who would rather sit alone than explain themselves one more time, the kind who feel drained after small talk, suspicious of kindness, and uncomfortable with closeness. Society often labels them as difficult or antisocial, but psychology tells a deeper, more human story. Imagine someone who once cared deeply, someone who trusted easily, listened fully, and showed up when it mattered. Over time, that openness was met with manipulation, rejection, or emotional neglect. Each experience left a mark. Slowly, the mind learned a lesson. Connection hurts. So the heart adopted. Walls went up. Distance felt safer than hope. What looks like hatred became a form of emotional survival. This story explores the inner world of people who say they hate people but still feel lonely. People who crave peace more than connection, yet secretly wonder why relationships always feel like a burden. We'll look at emotional burnout, unresolved trauma, social exhaustion, and the quiet fear of being misunderstood again. Not through labels or lectures, but through moments that feel familiar, thoughts you might have had but never said out loud. As the story unfolds, you'll start to recognize patterns, maybe in someone you know, or maybe in yourself. You'll see how past experiences shape present behavior and how the mind protects itself in ways that don't always look healthy on the surface. And just when it feels like this emotional distance is permanent, one question remains unanswered. Is hating people the end of the story or the beginning of something that hasn't healed yet? That unanswered question lingers because the truth is rarely simple. People who say they hate people don't usually wake up one day feeling that way. It forms slowly, quietly, shaped by moments most outsiders never see. A broken promise here, a betrayal there, conversations where they spoke honestly and were dismissed, mocked, or misunderstood. Over time, those small cuts added up, and something inside them began to withdraw. In their early days, many of them were the opposite of who they are now. They were listeners, helpers, the ones who showed up when others disappeared. They believed in connection, in loyalty, and being emotionally available. But that openness came at a cost. They absorbed other people's problems, moods, and expectations until their own emotional energy ran thin. What psychology calls emotional burnout often looks like indifference from the outside, but inside it feels like exhaustion that never fully goes away. As relationships piled up, so did disappointment. Trust was given too freely and taken advantage of. Boundaries were crossed. Kindness was mistaken for weakness. Each experience reinforced the same quiet belief: people take more than they give. So the mind adapted. It learned to stay alert, guarded, distant, not because it wanted isolation, but because isolation felt safer than being hurt again. Social interactions became draining instead of fulfilling. Small talk felt fake. Deep conversations felt risky. Even well-meaning people triggered suspicion. Compliments were questioned. Invitations were declined. Slowly, the world narrowed. Alone felt predictable. People felt complicated. And somewhere in that shift, resentment started to grow. Not always towards others, but towards the self for once believing things could be different. Yet beneath that surface-level dislike of people is often something else entirely: a fear of being vulnerable again, a fear of repeating the same emotional mistakes, a fear that if they let someone close, they'll lose themselves in the process. Psychology shows that avoidance can feel like control, especially when life once felt chaotic and unsafe emotionally. What makes this conflict deeper is that these individuals are rarely heartless. They still notice loneliness. They still feel moments of longing when they see others laugh freely or connect without fear. But wanting connection and trusting it are two very different things. So they stay stuck in between, craving peace, avoiding people, and questioning whether the problem lies with the world or within themselves. And as this inner tension builds, one unsettling thought begins to surface, quietly but persistently. What if pushing people away is protecting them? Or what if it's slowly turning them into the very thing they fear becoming? That thought doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in during quiet moments, late at night, or after another invitation goes unanswered. The person who hates people starts to notice patterns, not just in others, but in themselves. Every time someone gets close, something inside tightens. A joke feels intrusive. A question feels like pressure. Even kindness feels heavy, like an unspoken demand they'll eventually fail to meet. So they pull back again, telling themselves it's easier this way. But the world doesn't stop moving just because they've stepped aside. Friends drift away, messages slow down, familiar faces become distant memories. From the outside, it looks like independence. From the inside, it feels like being slowly erased. This is where the main conflict sharpens. They want peace, but peace is starting to feel a lot like isolation. And isolation, no matter how controlled, has a way of echoing. There are moments when they catch themselves watching people, a group laughing at a cafe, two strangers sharing an honest conversation, someone opening up without fear. These scenes stir something uncomfortable, not jealousy exactly, but confusion. How do others make it look so easy? Do they not see the risks, or did they simply decide that connection was worth the pain? Another layer of conflict comes from self-awareness. Deep down, they know their dislike of people isn't always fair. Not everyone hurt them. Not every conversation ends in disappointment. Yet the mind doesn't care about logic when it's learned to associate closeness with danger. Psychology calls this emotional conditioning, but living it feels more personal than clinical. It feels like being trapped in a reaction you didn't consciously choose. Some days they consider letting someone in again, maybe just a little, a short conversation, a half-truth instead of full honesty. But the moment feels fragile. One wrong response could confirm every fear they've been carrying. So they hesitate. Overthinking replaces action. Silence becomes the default choice. Meanwhile, another question grows louder beneath the surface. Is their hatred for people actually a form of self-protection, or has it become an identity they no longer know how to step out of? When avoidance turns into a habit, and habit turns into personality, the line between who they are and what they fear begins to blur. The tension builds here, in this uncomfortable middle space, not fully alone, not fully connected, not healed but not broken enough to ask for help. And as time passes, the stakes quietly rise, because the longer they stay distant, the harder it becomes to tell whether they're avoiding people to stay safe or avoiding them because they're afraid of what might happen if they finally stop running. The walls around them have grown taller now, but cracks are starting to show. Small, almost imperceptible, but enough to let doubt in. A casual conversation with a stranger lingers longer than it should. A friend's genuine concern feels like both a threat and a lifeline. Every interaction becomes a delicate calculation. How much to reveal, how much to hide, how to stay safe without losing the little connection they crave. The tension inside is like a storm, building quietly, threatening to break at any moment. Sometimes they catch themselves in mirrors, noticing the exhaustion etched in their own eyes. It's not just from avoiding people, it's from avoiding themselves, the part of them that still wants closeness but is terrified of the consequences. That internal struggle amplifies every social encounter, every unexpected call or invitation. A single word, a single tone of voice can trigger a flinch, a recoil, a near panic. But there's a stubborn flicker of curiosity, a need to test the boundaries, to see if trust is still possible. Then an event occurs, a gathering, a reunion, or even an unexpected meeting that pushes them out of their carefully maintained comfort zone. they are confronted with someone who sees through their defenses, someone who refuses to accept distance as the final answer. It could be a friend, a colleague, or even a stranger who speaks directly to the fears they've kept buried. The interaction is brief but intense, leaving a trace of vulnerability they are not used to feeling so openly. Suddenly, every instinct they have to withdraw clashes with the desire they've ignored for too long. As the hours pass, the tension grows. Thoughts swirl faster, memories of past betrayals and disappointments collide with glimpses of hope, and a single question looms larger than ever. Can they allow themselves to step into human connection again, or will fear dictate the rest of their life? Their heart races with the possibility that the protective walls they've built for so long might crumble, revealing both pain and the potential for something more. The suspense is almost tangible, leaving everyone wondering, which path will they choose when the moment finally arrives? The moment they had been